You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Convenience Matters. My name is John Eichberger with the Fuels Institute and NACS, and on this program, we talk about everything that happens to a convenience store and fuel retailers, and if it happens and it's important to them, it's probably important to you. You know, Donovan, about 160 million Americans go to a convenience store every day, 40 million plus fill up their cars every day, so basically anything that moves your body, moves your car, probably pick it up at a convenience store. And I'm joined by my co-host, Donovan Woods.
Good to be here, John. Donovan Woods with the Fuels Institute, Director of Operations, and I'm happy to be back on the podcast.
It's been a while, huh?
I missed this.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that is working with university students on our the Fuels Institute University Case Competition. And the good thing about this competition is we actually have winners, and our winners actually like us, and they want to participate, and we've actually invited them to our podcast today. So
we're going to be talking with Mary Fay and Jesse Spodak from Georgetown University. So, guys, welcome to the program. Jesse, Mary, thank you guys very much for calling in. I take it you guys are done with the finals and everything now?
Oh, yeah. I think we're actually both into our summer internships at this point, and thank you for having us on the podcast. We're excited.
Absolutely. Good to have you guys here. Mary, you still there with us?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, it's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys again.
Definitely. It was a good experience for me this year. This is our third year doing the case competition. This year we went a little bit differently by really giving you a lot of time. We went out very early in, the summer of 2016, just to get ready for this to be out later on this year. Now, the case competition this year, we changed it up in the sense that we introduced a new transportation energy system, and we gave that to our students. We wanted them to see, what would you do? How would you introduce a new fuel? Pick whatever source you want, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's liquid fuel, diesel, and also how would you introduce that to the market? And which car would you be able to configure? What kind of light-duty vehicle would you configure? How would you make it work? How does it go national? How would it be regional? We left that up to you. We went out to approximately, over 200 universities and brought in and scaled it down to about 6, and then we invited 3. And Georgetown, you guys actually came across as our number 1 with the presentation on the site at our annual meeting, and we're just happy you guys are here. What do you think about the case competition?
So I'll start. This case competition is very unique. As you mentioned, Donovan, the fact that it really allows students to work on and develop their idea throughout the course of an academic year is very unique. I don't personally know of any other case competitions that are structured that way. And so we really got to, once we developed our idea and submitted our initial abstract, we really got to dig into the research on our topic, and were able to learn a lot, not just about what we were proposing, but about what's going on in the automobile industry and in the fuels sector in general. And so it was a great learning experience, and that culminating with the competition at the annual meeting was just a really fantastic opportunity.
So, one of the reasons the Fuels Institute does this is because the industry struggles with the issue of how do you convert a market. And there are tons of professional researchers working on it. So much effort being put into how do you bring a new fuel or new vehicle product to market. What we really like to do is get new ideas, and that's one of the reasons we went to you guys. So, Jesse, what were your thoughts going into this? Because it's a pretty big task to take on it. How do you really change the market? And you guys took a very aggressive approach to a really well thought out strategy to try to bring something new to market, but it is a pretty daunting task, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think our thinking sort of focused around the idea that, there are these huge upfront investments that would be needed to do any sort of, large scale fuel transition. And so a lot of what we thought about was finding ways to minimize that upfront investment, since that's such an obstacle to achieving this kind of transformation in the industry. And, our proposal, I think you saw, sort of focused around having, smaller centralized hubs rather than large scale, widespread refueling infrastructure. And I think that was what sort of helped make the our proposal work.
And Jesse, you mentioned the small hubs and the refueling. Tell us a little bit about what your actual choice of fuel was.
Sure. So our idea centered around sort of the intersection of three trends that we saw in the market. One being the abundance of natural gas domestically. Another being the introduction of autonomous technology to vehicles and the growth of that going forward. And the third being ride-sharing services. So by combining those, we found that the efficiency, the fuel efficiency, the fuel density of LNG really gave us the best fuel source in order to have these continuously running autonomous vehicles that are a ride-sharing service that were sort of the key to our proposal.
So when you guys started looking at the market potential and try to come up with the development and implementation strategy, Mary, what were some of the things that kind of maybe took you by surprise or kind of raised your eyebrows? Say, we hadn't really thought about this level of complication in the market. What type of things where you can say, wow, that's have a new appreciation for what we have to deal with in terms of shifting the market?
Well, I would say definitely the difficulty in actually being able to use a different type of fuel is something that really became apparent as we continued our research. And I think it's really common for people to think of different fuels that could be advantageous for one reason or another, maybe because of price or maybe because of environmental benefits or availability. But the challenge of how do you actually make it so that fuel is commercially viable, that continues to arise. And I think that's why big transformations in this industry are so difficult. So we definitely did find that to use LNG in vehicles, it would be difficult to determine how to actually make that fuel available for large fleets of light-duty vehicles. But as Jesse mentioned, the hub model helps to mitigate that obstacle to a degree. And so I think that's just something that the industry will continue to face as a big factor in what makes it difficult to implement new fuels.
No, Mary, you mentioned just to be able to get the scope of everything, how difficult it is to launch a new fuel. I have to know, because we hear a lot about why don't we just do this or why don't we just do that? I'm curious, did you go in with the thought of why don't we just do this? And did you learn anything in terms of, okay, that's a lot harder to do that?
So before we had submitted our abstract, we did look into a few different types of fuels. I don't know, I can't remember any fuels that we really thought, would be very advantageous that ended up not being. We just really wanted to come up with something a bit different than what already exists. And so I don't know, Jesse, do you remember going through any different ideas that we then nixed?
Yeah, I mean, I think we spent a lot of time focused on the CNG versus LNG debate to some extent,
right? Just
because the CNG does have a more active current network of refueling stations and transportation of the actual compressed natural gas. So that was definitely something that we thought about. In the end, when we put the numbers together, what we found was that the cost savings from using CNG, which had a more advanced on the ground network as it is, were offset by savings or actually revenue increases from using LNG because those vehicles had to refuel less. But I would say we definitely, when we submitted the abstract, we were, that was only about a 3-page submission, and we hadn't had as much time to go through all the research that we did by the end of it. There were certainly a lot of speed bumps along the way where we said, oh gosh, have we made the right decision?
Right.
But when we compared across fuel sources, we felt in the end that probably with a little bit of luck that we really did make the right decision from the outset.
Your comment on that is it's funny because one of the reasons we like having the students compete in this on some of these real world market questions is because typically, those of us in industry have been doing this for a while. I think kids are fairly starry-eyed and altruistic, and everything's going to be just easy and rosy, and we need to do whatever is the best for the environment, the best for this and the other. But when you start diving into the layers of what it takes, reality takes a pretty strong position right in front of where you want to head. And what I'm always disappointed is when people become professionals and are in this industry for 20, 30 years and they ignore that reality and they make these projections and these predictions that are just ridiculous. So one of the ways that, Donna, we've tried to structure this competition is to make sure the reality is there. And so, Jesse and Mary have talked about the abstract. So for those listening, basically the students that are invited to participate have to send us a 3-page abstract. We whittle it down to about 15 teams that we invite to submit 15 to 20-page final papers. And then we have a panel of judges that select the top 3. That's when it starts getting real. Because then, we fly those top 3 teams out to our annual meeting, the Fuels 2017 this year, and they present to 100+ industry professionals. And those industry professionals have the opportunity to ask these students questions. And then they're the ones who judge to see who the winner is. And man, can you guys describe your feelings? I mean, here you are, your students, you're diving into a new realm of research and analytics, and now you have to stand in front of 100 people who make their living doing this. What was that experience like, Jesse?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll start by saying that it would have been far more terrifying had we not, had you guys over at the Fuel Institute and at NACS to sort of bounce ideas off of as we went through the process and get feedback, especially in terms of keeping those estimates realistic, because you can do research and find a lot of people saying that, autonomous vehicles are going to be everywhere in the next 5 years. Right. And certainly to have some experienced industry folks to advise us on that really helped keep us, I think, on a good path with reasonable projections. But then,
Definitely.
that made it so much more manageable to deal with presenting in front of those 100, 150 industry leaders that were there. We felt like we had talked through all the issues that we knew our model would face, and that we had guessed at some of the questions that might be asked. So that made it a little less intimidating. But then that said, to be at that conference and be surrounded by those folks and have them approach us to talk to us was really a pretty incredible experience, because so often in our MBA experience, we're reaching out and trying to get phone calls or meetings with high-level folks, and to have it be sort of the other way was a really special experience, I think for everybody on our team.
I love hearing that, because one of the things that we have tried to do with this whole Fuels Institute project and the whole program that we put together is to encourage exchange, encourage the industry to talk to each other. And I think what you found is that's really what professionalism is about. It's about industry stakeholders. No matter if you're on the same side of an issue or if you're working on the same topics, we're all serving the end customer and sharing information and engaging and networking, getting to know one another and understanding perspectives is critical. And even when, you guys, I think all 3 teams found a very welcome environment of our audience.
Indeed. Wanted
to talk to the students. I mean, Donovan, what were your impressions of that interaction between the professionals and the students at the conference?
If you were there and you didn't know who Jesse and Mary and the rest of the students were, you wouldn't know that they weren't actually students. They fit right in. Our audiences, although different industries within the mobility sector, they are there because they care about the industry. They care about learning more and just getting that feedback from other sides of it. And I think they were out there with you guys. I saw them out there with you guys, talking to you, sitting with you, even through dinner and even before we actually had the award ceremony. So I'm curious, with all that conversation, all the time you guys had with the audience, did you gain anything from that? Was that a benefit to you at all? And I can go to either. How about Mary? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, without this, would have never gotten the opportunity to get exposure to so many different stakeholders within the fuel and transportation sector. And so it was absolutely incredible. And like you said, John, there's definitely people that are coming, that are participating in the industry from different angles and different roles, but it was really a unique experience to be able to see everyone working together and really discussing what is the state of the industry, what is the future of the industry, and to be immersed into that after doing this research on what we are thinking could be part of the future was absolutely incredible.
So, Mary, you're saying that in the room with those in the oil sector, or maybe from, let's say, hydrogen or electric vehicles, there were no fights? You didn't see anybody actually take a swing on anybody?
Not that I witnessed. I would say there was some healthy debate, which, is always great and is part of the discussion and learning process. But no, I think it was maintained a pretty professional air the whole time. So everyone got to be in Denver, so no one, I don't think, was too upset.
Denver is a good place to hang out for a couple of days. So you guys spent close to a year now. I guess we started this last summer, so 10 months up until now, kind of working with the Institute, working on the case competition, spending those 2 or 3 days with the industry professionals. From where you started to where you are now, what has been your largest aha about the mobility market? Jesse, we can start with you.
Sure. Well, this competition has certainly sort of had an effect on my career trajectory, as you both know, but I'm sure the listeners don't, is that I'm actually interning at an automotive company this summer, and that's not something that was necessarily on my radar a year ago as I went into my first year of business school. But just because of this case competition and the various newsletters and websites that I signed up for and visited frequently, it's really sort of dialed me in on how these industries are moving. And certainly you have certain companies in the various industries making big headlines, but not missing those smaller incremental changes that are happening within the industry, especially as it relates to autonomous vehicles, ride-sharing technologies, and new fuel sources. It's I don't know if there was one big aha moment, but just feeling that I've gradually gained almost an expertise in this industry over the course of the year. If you had asked me a year ago anything about the fuel industry, I probably would not have had more than a few sentences to say. So it's been more of a transformation than I ever expected a case competition to have.
How about you, Mary?
So I would say that the way that I think about the industry has also changed, and one of the big ways is that, and I think a lot of people, when they think about the automobile market, really just think of the OEMs, the manufacturers, and I never even, I hope you don't take offense to this, but I never even knew there was a convenience store association, or never really thought about it from that perspective. And so really thinking about, as this industry continues to change, all of this less obvious, less talked about stakeholders is, I think, a huge part of it that the general public probably forgets about, or it doesn't come to mind as much. And then another big takeaway I had was when thinking about different fuel types and comparing them from an efficiency standard, a cost perspective, environmentally, it's important to not just think about the gross emissions per vehicle, but also about things that we incorporated into our proposal, like what the range of the vehicle is, things that, may not be as easily comparable and will require a deeper analysis. But I think that was a huge takeaway, since people like to make big comparisons and the general public will latch on to them when really things are a bit more complicated, especially when it comes to fuels. So
I think you guys summed it up pretty well. I mean, that's kind of the whole purpose of trying to get people together, is understand the scope of it. Now, Don, I think we'd be remiss to not say, we've got some great support for the case competition. We had corporate sponsors this year: Flint Hills Resources and Mansfield Oil, Tesoro Corporation, Nissan, and Phillips 66 were all major sponsors of the case competition, making it possible to bring Mary, Jesse, and Georgetown to our competition. Our runners-up, University of Utah and Clemson University. Great competition all around. And, Mary, Jesse, thank you guys so much for joining us today, and really thank you very much for participating in the case competition and sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for having us.
And we will talk to all of you on the next episode of Convenience Matters.
You've been listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. For more information, go to nacsonline.com.